Infamous Second Son is a superhero game that prioritizes greatly on its gameplay and creativity. The direction this game takes when trying to mix different powers feels very unique, and with its art style in the open world is actually pretty interesting. And yet it's as if Second Son is now forgotten. I mean, the story is pretty solid and the gameplay mechanics are still innovative and creative to this day. But one question I have that I want to answer is this: is it still good after almost 11 years? How this game will be reviewed is by the story, open world, and gameplay mechanics, just to give you the full idea on how good or bad the game actually is. How I'll be reviewing the story of each game from now on is firstly talking about the writing and then the actual characters themselves. But before I get started on reviewing the story of this game, I first need to describe what karma is in this game and how it affects both the gameplay and the story. It's essentially the type of morals that you have given to the character as you progress through the story, which gives you different skills and different endings to the story, which can change the pace of the game quite dramatically. I did play both karmas, but I played a lot more of the evil karma because I thought it's more interesting to see the hero change into something worse than the villain they're fighting against. But even the hero karma that they have is actually pretty good with its story of redemption. But before we start with any of that, we should start with the story summary to kind of give you an idea on what even happened in this game, story-wise. The story of Infamous Second Son follows Delsin Rowe, a rebellious young man from the Okomish tribe who had been vandalizing until he was interrupted by his brother Reggie, who had argued with Delsin on if he wanted to continue following his path as a criminal, until it was cut short when Delsin accidentally absorbs the powers of a conduit named Hank, after a military truck crashes on the Okomish reservation not long before. The leader of the DOP, Brooke Augustine, hunts down Hank and Delsin, and after she tortures Delsin to make him confess he has powers, in which you either give a decision to either refuse or confess, which doesn't really matter, which I'll get to, she knocks out Delsin and tortures the rest of the tribe. After he learned what Augustine had done to his tribe, he sets out to save his tribe and confront her, with Reggie reluctantly following him along. Delsin and Reggie's plan was to make a surprise attack on Augustine by loosening the control the DOP had in Seattle, but along the way he finds and absorbs the powers of other conduits, including Fetch, a neon-wielding serial killer bent on revenge against all drug dealers after what the drug had done to make her unintentionally kill her brother. And after Delsin allied with Fetch, despite Reggie's disapproval, he confronts Augustine, but he ultimately fails just before he got himself killed, an angel had saved him, and he is dropped off to another island in Seattle. Moments later, he gets a call from Eugene, who had proposed to help Delsin to overthrow the DOP, but as Delsin was trying to get some hostages from the DOP truck, the angel came back and took the hostages instead. And that's when Delsin and Reggie devised a plan to find the hostages by using Reggie as bait. This plan, of course, worked, and when Delsin goes to the angel's lair, we encounter and defeat He Who Dwells, who is really just Eugene in disguise. When Delsin absorbs his power and origin story, learning that he was just an average nerd who got powers based on his video games, Reggie tries to arrest Eugene since he's another conduit, but Delsin questions if this amount of arresting was because of the blatant racism, and Reggie calms down and left the two conduits alone. Delsin had then convinced Eugene to fully help him in overthrowing the DOP. After Delsin had formed his superpowered team and started defeating more of the DOP's forces, he learns that Hank is killing many of the DOP, and so Delsin sets out to catch up to Hank, to recruit him, and that's when Hank told Delsin that both Fetch and Eugene had somehow got captured by Augustine, and that both Hank and Delsin has to work together to free them. Delsin and Reggie reluctantly agree with this plan, and it almost works until Augustine finds and traps Delsin. You see, Delson's journey is marked by betrayal, particularly when it turned out that Hank was actually working for Augustine after all, and tricked Delson so that he would be able to escape. But just as Delson was about to die, Reggie fires a rocket from a rocket launcher to catch Augustine off guard, allowing Delson to temporarily escape. I say temporarily because Augustine had cornered both the Acomish brothers and struck Reggie with her concrete powers, resulting in Reggie being killed.
Listen, we can't let this stuff get to you two. I'm so proud of you. No. Always have been. No. Lindsay, don't. I love you, bro.
Delson, in a fit of rage, battles the DUP and Augustine so much that the battle destroys the concrete structure, allowing Delson to escape. Delson first finds Hank to get revenge since he was responsible for Reggie's death in the first place, and he finds Hank at a dock, and we find out that he wanted to leave Seattle to see his daughter, and it gives us the choice to either let Hank go to his daughter or kill him. And seeing how it would make sense for this story, I decided to kill him. For obvious reasons. He then goes to the home base that Augustine was hiding in, and she tells us that she's actually protecting the conduits by capturing them and turning them into soldiers. But of course, Delson disagrees, leading to a boss fight that we most certainly win. After absorbing Augustine's concrete powers and learning of her tragic backstory on her point of view for protecting the conduits, Delson defeats her in a second boss fight, this time with Augustine's powers, and ultimately kills her. In the evil version of the ending, he becomes consumed by his obsession by collecting all conduit powers and killing his tribe after they rejected him from curing them because of his crimes, and ultimately becoming the ruthless leader of the conduits that he swore to destroy.
You, everybody else, will die without me. Or have you forgotten that?
We haven't forgotten. And we will never forget.
But...
This evil version of the story is a tale of power, betrayal, and revenge, with moral choices that leads to destruction of a former hero. Comparatively, if you choose the good ending, you expose Augustine for what she really is, and she is arrested, and the DUP disband, while Delson, Fetch, and Eugene being the advocates for the coexistence between humans and conduits, which is called the Second Age, with all of the imprisoned conduits being free from Curtin K prison. Delson finally returns to the reservation and heals all of his tribe members with his powers, and then paints a mural. The good ending's meaning is a symbol of redeeming victims who had been discriminated against for their race, and it is a tale of the fight against racism and redemption. Now, when I had played through the story of Second Son on both Karmas, I had thought that the writing for Second Son was not exactly the best superhero story that I have ever seen, but it actually wasn't bad either. The story is clearly around the theme of corruption or redemption, as throughout the game you're given the choice to be good or evil. But one big problem with this morality system is that none of your choices that you make actually change significantly. Like, for example, with Fetch, when you're evil, both of you discuss and doing evil stuff, but after that one quest you play with Fetch, she would just sound normal, evil or not. Another example was the scene when Reggie died, is that the dialogue would be the same whether you were good or not, which is of course strange, since if you're evil and hurt and kill countless of lives, I doubt that he would be very proud of you for that. But if you were good, that would be more of a fitting and emotional moment. Initially, as I brainstormed for this script, I thought about talking about every choice that you make, but I found out later on, after I did some research, that it really doesn't matter, since most choices are very short term, except for the endings. The evil ending is of course the most dramatic and darker version, which to my opinion had delivered on the shock value that I was looking for, like when Delsin was exiled from the tribe for his crimes, angering Delsin to kill all of the Akomish tribe he promised to rescue. But the good ending, having a touching yet triumphant ending, has done an excellent job at making a deep impact on both the player and the story. However, what I really liked are all the little details that help diversify both the good and evil stories, such as just before the final cutscene, the evil version has Delsin saying,
I had a promise to take care of.
whereas the good version has Delsin saying,
Now I had a promise to keep.
or the kill log as we kick Augustine after she killed Reggie in the good karma has quoted Tyrant wounded, but in the evil version we get Authority wounded, which further elevates this story even more. My only wish for this good/evil karma is that it actually carries on long term for all of the choices that you make, not just the ending or its aftermath. Like, I would have liked to see Fetch and Eugene starting to have these two karmas actually affect their personalities, whether you choose them to be evil and thus kill more and have more lethal tactics to fighting, whereas with the good karma, they would choose tactics that wouldn't kill their opponents, but rather subdue them, or at least have their personalities changing to either being more compassionate or cruel throughout the rest of the game. With this lack of impact that the morality system had on most choices that you make, it felt like the use of said morality system was clumsy and underdeveloped, which is a shame because aside from the choices that you have made in the game, I feel like the story was actually pretty good, and maybe ahead of its time, but because of the morality system being short-lived and even at times inconsistent, it made most events of Second Son forgettable. Now let's talk about the characters, and for this portion we will talk about Delsin, Reggie, Augustine, Fetch, and Eugene. Delsin was the irresponsible delinquent that had felt lost and without purpose, which was caused by the traumatic loss of his parents as mentioned at the beginning of the game by Reggie. But we see that when he gets his powers, that though he was scared at first, he eventually finds his new purpose with his new conduit life. At first being the savior of the Akomish tribe, and now becoming an all-powerful conduit tyrant, or becoming the savior that the conduits needed. And what I found was that this impacts all the small details that the morality system had affected Delsin, like how on the evil playthrough he looks tired and restless, as if he is becoming his corrupted self, and his jacket had the skull of a bird symbolizing the corruption in Delsin's heart. But on the good playthrough he is more healthy and alive, with a thriving bird on his jacket, and little details like this helps give the story its own style and gives perspective on how a person can either fall from his living and likable persona to a disgusting and muddy mindset, or rising to a more compassionate and grateful persona, building the theme of mental health throughout the game. All of these small details ultimately created my appreciation of the character of Delsin when we see the shift of his mental health, and his good version of the story obviously comes off as a story of mental well-being, and getting through all the hard stuff when it comes to mental well-being, as well as a story of the awareness against racism and redeeming the victims, while the evil story being the focus on corruption of the powerful, and the only way to get what you want is to do it the dirty way. And while they aren't exactly the most perfect or even complex stories on mental health, it's at least a decent one that amplifies Delsin's impact on the story, and while also spreading awareness on a serious topic that still needs to be heard these days, making the story much more appealing whether I would play as the evil version or not. Reggie is Delsin's brother, and the first thing we see is that Reggie is both his backbone and the father figure. Reggie is constantly throughout the game wanting to find ways to help Delsin positively so that when he found Delsin collapsing on him, he feels that the conduit's powers are more of a disease to cure. But when he learns more of how these powers can help people, he finally sees conduits as normal people and accepting the powers as gifts instead of curses. Reggie, of course, symbolizes the theme of racism to different races. And at first I didn't like Reggie for the blatant racism that he clearly shown, but once I knew why they took the direction, I liked Reggie a lot better, and ultimately made his death even more impactful to the story. The problem is that whenever he tries to show his concerns, he doesn't really do anything. Like whenever he tries to arrest Fetch and Eugene, Delsin Reggie just get into like a small fight, and then Reggie just forgets about it, which kind of sucks. Also, I would like to see Reggie actually start to hate Delsin in the evil version of the story, since Delsin actually does some messed up stuff. Augustine is overall a pretty good villain with a great backstory that makes you understand that while of course you know what she's doing is wrong, it's understandable given her circumstances and trauma. At first she looks like a person who just kills for fun, as we thought that she just killed Hank, when we realized that she merely transported Hank to trap Delsin to kill us before we can free the other conduits at Curtin K prison. And we have of course learned her origin story about giving her friends away to the military to protect them, which is honestly the best she could have done in that situation to get the government's trust and have conduits kept, not killed. And when she did too good of a job with the DUP, she had to let Fetch, Eugene, and Hank go to prove that the world still needs the DUP, and it showed that this was a villain that had many layers and is strategic, and is most of all, an intelligent foe. Her boss fight was also pretty good, with the first one feeling a small piece of her power, and the other one being the craziest boss fight yet, with that whole scorpion fight thing. It was crazy. Overall, I like this character both as a villain and as another symbol for this game as trauma. Fetch and Eugene are, however, the weakest link, as they are pretty much hollow when it comes to their character development. Both characters complete their arcs in a few missions, leaving them pretty shallow. For Fetch, she was just unfriendly to Delsin, but after helping Delsin on a mission, she's either stopping killing other people or she's going to keep killing. This is even the same with Eugene when he overcomes his fear. It's not even worth talking about them because they are pretty much the same thing, just with different genders. And I know that Fetch is a junkie and Eugene is a gamer, so they could have their own different stories, but the problem is they weren't explored enough, and thus it's just short, it's again hollow, and they're both the same. And yeah, it's just kind of disappointing because besides their characters, their powers are actually pretty good, probably the best in the game, but man. In my opinion, the story overall is actually pretty decent for a superhero game with all things considered. The writing itself with the Karma had an overall lack of impact over most of the writing, and it felt like it had dragged the story to a point where it made most of the story forgettable, but it is however saved by most of the characters having excellent writing that has further diversified by the amount of themes that most of these characters had represented that as a whole had made at least this story much more appealing. I wouldn't go into Second Son expecting the most complex story or the most fleshed out story like other superhero games such as Marvel's Spider-Man or the Batman Arkham games, but rather as a game that values more of its gameplay mechanics and graphics. For this portion of the video, I'll divide it in 4 subsections. First is describing the actual open world, the second will be the graphics and the game's art style, the third subsection being what you can do in the said open world, and the final subsection being about the collectibles. There are pretty much 2 different areas that you can explore, but when it comes to these areas, they are very similar to each other when it comes to the streets and the buildings. But one thing that you can definitely see in these cityscape environments is the DUP trying to give the effect that they are everywhere, all with the superpowers to control all these areas and hunt down any remaining conduits and protect the normal people. Of course, this doesn't matter as we pretty much just destroy all their checkpoints and gain control of all of Seattle at the very end of the game, but it is still such a cool detail that gives not only more variety to the generally boring look of the buildings, but also an interesting part of the story. Another type of structures found in Seattle that feel unique to most open worlds is Augustine's concrete structures, which is used to be parts for a checkpoint and thus were more heavily guarded, as these structures give most of the other checkpoints on the map, and these concrete structures make infiltrating the DUP look intimidating, but equally rewarding when you do conquer the structure, as you not only get the shards that help you expand your skill trees, but also do some sightseeing. But overall, the map is an impressive open world with many details that give Seattle an interesting take on if the government fully controlled everything in a sort of way. The reason why we are talking about the art style and the graphics of the game is because the decisions made behind the art style and its graphics were due to the situation that Sucker Punch games were feeling. You see, Infamous 2 had two different endings, where Cole, the main character, either takes all the powers of the main antagonist and becomes a supervillain, or sacrifices himself for the world, and the developers had a choice to make. Either continue with evil Cole, or make a new story and world, and they chose the second option to make Infamous Second Son. And from a story perspective, it would make more sense for the fanbase since most of them chose the good ending. This is why we see more different takes on the story and theming. The more powers you get, which I'll get into, and of course the art style of the open world as we are talking about right now. The last two Infamous games had previously had a comic book aesthetic that had seemed to be abandoned in exchange for Delsin's graffiti art to take place, which had worked in the community's favor for new art styles being in the game. And there was even more colors used for Delsin's new powers that had made the open world and the character model feel even more connected to the story. And there's even new lighting and particle effects that were unlike anything in its time, as the different lighting techniques filled the world with bright neon lights and natural sunlight depending on the time of day, which had made the open world feel more beautiful. And the reason for this great push of graphical improvement was because this was one of the first games that the PlayStation 4 had launched with, and thus giving the game a graphical marvel. There isn't really much to say about both the art style and the graphics of the game apart from both fundamentals have been perfected so well that there is actually little to fault, and is still regarded as a very impressive game graphically, with the art style not only holding up to this day, but even giving this game its own look to a point that I wish Sucker Punch used the graffiti art as the main cover for the case of Second Son instead of having this goofy 2014 superhero cover, which was honestly the word for it is just cringe. Like, you'll cringe at it. For this portion of the video, we can discuss different types of side quests. Firstly, the DOP side quests, karma missions, and finally other DLC story missions. The DOP's side mission is pretty much the main side quest for Infamous Second Son, which is basically the process of loosening the DOP's grip around all the districts by completing different but repetitive side quests relating to the DOP in the following order. The first step being destroying the DOP command center, which can cause the DOP to panic and allow Delsin to divide and conquer. And to destroy the center would award not only 4 blast shards for skill trees, which we'll talk about later, but also unlocking all the other side quests on the map and lower the DOP's control percentage in the district by 12%. The second step is the side missions involved allow you to tank the percentage down to as much as 10% until it reaches the 30% mark for a district showdown. My favorite side mission out of all of them is the stencil art, which consists of you using a DualShock 4 controller as if it were a spray can, which I think is cool. District showdowns are unlocked when you lower the DOP control to 30%. And when this happens, Delsin vandalizes a DOP billboard and calls a helpline to tell the operator that there's a conduit on the loose, so that she can send soldiers to apprehend the situation. After we defeat the DOP, we would not only get no DOP patrolling the area as much, but we also get a new jacket design to wear. Now, these DOP side quests do get good, especially when they pretty much fill the area with soldiers and guns to make progressing through the quest even harder and even more chaotic at times for your very first playthrough. But one thing that I don't like is that after that first playthrough, it gets pretty boring from time to time since you just want to get all the minor quests done and play the district showdowns, as they are pretty much more interesting. Like, you will either be given just like 2 helicopters to blow up and it's like the easiest thing imaginable, but then the other time you'll literally given like 20 enemies to kill or subdue. It's like interesting on how they manage it, but of course there are some exceptions, like stencil art, which, like I said before, it actually feels like you're doing the art. But aside from that, the DUP missions usually do get repetitive. But I think it's great to give you the sense of accomplishment when you clear out all the districts and beat all the DUP side quests. The next kind of side missions are what I like to call the karma side missions, and they pretty much serve as a way to increase your karma level as you progress through the map. Or if you're a completionist, they would give you a decent portion of PlayStation trophies, with 5 trophies for the evil karma and 4 trophies for good karma, as I show you right now. Personally, I find this as something that I would only complete to do in between actual side quests or just putting in the grind of maxing out the karma levels. The last kind of side missions are the other story related missions and DLC. The first being Cole's Legacy. Cole's Legacy is about Delsin uncovering the events of what happened between the 7-year time span between the Infamous 2 and the events of Infamous Second Son. And this has cameos for Zeke, Dunbar, and Raymond Wolf, which accounts for something for Infamous fans, but I mean, it's all downhill from here. You see, what you actually do isn't really special, which consists of beating up the DUP and finding reports about Cole, and I find it kind of forgettable since they don't really talk much about Cole at all, but more about the conduits and how it will be helpful to them. When you beat the side quest, you get Cole's jacket, which I think is actually pretty cool, since now we can look like Cole a little bit as we play through the game, so I guess that's one benefit. But at least it's free now for everyone who wants to try it. Overall, I don't think that this is exactly the best DLC that you can play, and there's a better one called First Light, which I want to make a whole video out of it because this is independent DLC, whatever that means. But if you're into collecting different outfits for your character, or you're an Infamous fan, then this story mission would be for you. This second and final side quest is the Paper Trail side quest, which consists of a dead inmate called Celia Pendergast as a guide to lead Delsin to different crime scenes and solve a puzzle, until we find out that the DUP's chief scientist, Tyler Bennett, is planning to sell this list of suspected conduits to the US military. But Delsin is able to track down Bennett's lackey and prevent the sale from going ahead, saving these conduits. Now, I actually do not like Paper Trail at all, because why did it drag on for so long to the point where it actually felt boring to play? Like, honestly, it's a nightmare when it comes to understanding the story. And worst of all, you don't even get new paper powers whenever you're running around with this paper conduit. Like, you get nothing. But to give credit where credit is due, it made me feel like a detective in a way when photographing evidence, and I assume it would have been even cooler when their website was still up to help you solve the case, and it was all in a different take. But this ultimately does not save it, since the only thing that made it unique is gone, and the side quest doesn't even feel fun to complete. Overall, the DUP side missions are the main reason you'd want to play it again, and most of the other side quests are not even worth completing, except maybe Cole's Legacy if you really want his jacket. If you're looking for a superhero game that has an addictive grind after you complete the main campaign, then this might not be for you. Now, unfortunately, there are not a lot of collectibles that you can earn in the game, especially with the amount of side quests in the game, but that doesn't mean that there isn't any collectibles. You see, after you beat some of the district showdowns, you can get different designs for Delsin's jacket, and I like these designs since they give a comic-y effect, but the only thing that I wish was more collectibles in the game, for certain side quests like Paper Trail, since it literally gives you nothing. However, I do understand the lack of collectibles, as it's probably the lack of side quests other than the DUP related quests. But still, like, why is there nothing for Paper Trail? Can someone explain me that? Overall, the open world is of course very centered around the DUP and its art style, with most of its care is related to the open world, as is to the DUP and the overall look of Seattle, while most of the other aspects related to the open world or post-game activities feel pretty average at best. And it's honestly one of the game's biggest weaknesses. But the next portion is even more so the game's biggest strength. While the story section of Second Son seems to be pretty strong, but the open world portion is a bit mid, what definitely feels the most strong in this game is the gameplay mechanics. that they present to you. For this final portion of the video, I will talk about everything about the powers in the following order. Firstly, describing all 4 powers, how good they are, and the second, describing how to use these powers to traverse through the game, and finally, describing combat. In Second Son, there are 4 powers that you get as you progress through the game, which are Smoke from Hank, Neon from Fetch, Video from Eugene, and Concrete from Augustine. And with all the powers having their own benefit and having their own kind of karma upgrades as you level up your powers in the skill trees. What you will notice from using Smoke powers is that it's focused on getting you used to the basics. Both the shooting and the combat aspect of Smoke is very strong, as the smoke shots and blasts deal low damage, but it has a lot of ammo, which doesn't make using the smoke powers feel impossible. And Delsin's smoke chain is quick to finish other enemies after shooting them. However, the traversal mechanics of dashing through the open world makes it feel inconvenient and forces you to go to other mechanics, which can be good when you're near buildings with vents. But as an overall traversal mechanic, it is really just the basics to help you get used to the game, which is not bad, but is not something that I'd personally use a lot traversal wise. But other than that, the smoke powers are done excellently, and in general is a great first power that you get to use in the game. The Neon powers are pretty much a reference to speedsters in general. When it comes to Neon powers, I love 3 things about it. Firstly, I love that not only do they make the traversal mechanic of Neon powers much more fun than most other games when implementing super speed, but it's also a great maneuver if the battle gets too crazy and you need to heal up. 2, I love how, unlike most powers you use, you actually need to have at least a decent amount of skill or aim to actually kill some of these enemies, especially when you want to take them out in their weak points. And 3, I love how the Neon powers are pretty much intertwined with the karma system, by the use of weak points with the headshots being the evil karma and the legs being the good karma, which just makes the karma shine even more and helps connect the story and the gameplay together. The power of video is my favorite out of all the powers you get to use as Delsin Rowe, as it feels like many game mechanics have significantly improved for the right use cases. While they are not so much as requiring skill as it did with Neon powers, it's a lot more chaotic. The traversal mechanic for videos is also just right up my alley, as now I can stay in the air for much longer and fully take in the beauty of Seattle. And the cherry on top for this power is the fact that the color of your video powers can change to either blue or red to symbolize different karmas, and even give you different melee weapons to use. For me, this is the perfect power for its colorful and chaotic energy, but I'm also sure that many people will also like Neon, since the two have both similar and wildly different takes on their powers. Now this power is what I consider to be the worst power of all the powers that you get in the game, which is Concrete. And there's no point in describing in detail this power because it has a disappointing lack of skill improvement or unique features that compared to Smoke, Neon, or Video. As you play through the entire game, Delsin keeps going on and on about getting Concrete powers, and when you get those powers in Augustine's final boss fight, it feels great that, for once, you get to use her powers against her. But after that boss fight, there are some decisions that I don't personally like, such as the traversal mechanics are pretty bad for Concrete, as you only get Concrete thrusters, which are the same thrusters for all of the 3 different powers, and Boulder Dash, which feels the same as Light Speed in Neon powers, but a little bit worse. And when paired together, unlike the Neon powers, which feel great together, for this feels inconvenient. And all the other combat mechanics that you get to use all feel pretty similar to each other, meaning there isn't anything groundbreaking about Concrete power that makes me want to use these powers, apart from the sheer strength that this power has that others don't. In fact, that's all this power really is. It's just head-on strength. However, what makes this worse is that unlike any of the other powers, this somehow, I kid you not, has no karma bomb, which is a strange decision to me. Each Karma Bomb gives the powers its originality, which makes the powers feel even more different from each other, with all the other different ways the bombs either kills or subdues enemies. So the fact that the power that had been hyped for most of the main story doesn't even have this iconic ultimate power with cool animations feels very odd. It makes the power feel as if there was no creativity going in it. Overall, this power is just not really desirable, specifically with the fact that both neon and video powers exist, that makes the existence of concrete pointless, besides just brute strength. Now, most of these powers that you get to use are very good at first. As the first power, Smoke is the best power that Sucker Punch chose to start off with this neon powers focusing on precision skills of the player while also giving the fun of being a true speedster. And of course, the video power being my favorite power is what I think to be chaotic and colorful weapon of all the powers. But unfortunately, the concrete power is the most underwhelming and disappointing power out of the four, with the power feeling like it's only there because of the plot said so. And the power's only purpose gameplay wise is to be the strongest power out of all the powers damage wise. However, the powers are fun to use, especially when it comes to the variety of situations that these powers are useful for. Overall, it shows the game devs were focused on making at least the first three to make the most fun part out of the game. I am still salty about Concrete. So what we have learned so far is that Infamous Second Son has both great storytelling when it comes to the characters such as Delson Rowe, Reggie, and Augustine, and great gameplay mechanics that are fun and rewarding to the player, whether it would be getting all the skills in the skill tree to getting all the powers at the game, while tying the karma morality system with the powers to expand the direction of the story with a beautiful open world that still holds up from a graphical, artistic, and poetic point of view. But there is still some issues in the game, like how the writing for the karma morality system in the story is not very concise, and the power of Concrete was hyped tremendously throughout the game, yet the power itself is disappointing and an underwhelming mess. But even with these issues, I still find this game as a decent superhero game that I actually recommend to anyone to play. But I'm going to leave you with two questions. First, if you have played Infamous Second Son before, do you think this was a good third and final game to wrap up? Or do you perhaps want another sequel to properly wrap up things? And are there any of you who would be excited for a new remaster for any of the older Infamous games? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you to the next one. Goodbye.